Good evening. I'd like to call your attention tonight to the book of 1 Thessalonians, and we're going to be in chapter 4. Paul's letters to the church in Thessalonica were written about 18 years or so before, or after, I should say, the crucifixion of Jesus. And the church there was established during Paul's second missionary journey, and probably a year, approximately or so, before these letters were written. And Thessalonica was a city in northern Greece, and it's still in existence today, actually. It has a population of about 320,000. And in these letters that the Apostle Paul wrote, he encourages these Christians to be diligent, living holy and godly lives, and keeping in mind or in view the imminent return of Christ and the day of the Lord. And this letter applies to us today equally well. And here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, I believe this one chapter is kind of a summary of both of these letters. As I go through this, be thinking about how this touches you. I'm not going to read every word of every verse, but rather just kind of summarize it, condense it down a little bit. I guess you could say this will be a summary of the summary, if chapter 4 is a summary of both books. Now, of course, there's more than just what's covered in chapter 4 in these books, but this kind of touches all of the areas, in my opinion. I divided, or I should say the chapter kind of lends itself to being divided into three different sections. So let's take a look at the first section. This will be verses 1 through 8. And remember, I'm condensing this, so this is going to be kind of brief tonight. He begins by exhorting us to abound more and more. Abound in what, you say? Abound in our walk with Christ to please God, because this is the will of God. We are to be in control of our bodies, our minds, and our actions, because God did not call us to uncleanness, but in holiness. Therefore, anyone who rejects this is rejecting God. The second section covers verses 9 through 12. Concerning brotherly love, he says, you are taught by God to love one another. And then he urges us to increase more and more. Increase in what, you say? Well, increase in brotherly love. He goes on to say that we should aspire to lead a quiet life, to mind our own business and work with our hands so we may walk properly and lack nothing. In other words, we are to keep growing in Christ and developing Christ-like attitudes. And then the third section finishes the chapter. This is verses 13 through 18. In this section, Paul reminds us of the reason that we should do what he's already outlined in these first two sections. Whether we have died or remain alive, when Christ returns, we have hope if we are in him. And I'm going to read all of verses 16 and 17 here. And this is from the New King James Version. It says, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And thus we shall always be with the Lord. This is where our hope lies. If we are in Christ, we can look forward to leaving the troubles of this world behind and spending eternity in heaven where there are no tears or sorrow or pain, only the joy of being with the Lord. Now let me summarize what I've just summarized. I guess you could say this is a summary of the summary of the summary. Number one, we are to be committed to godly living under the authority of Christ. Number two, we should be committed to brotherly love, to serving, and to personal responsibility. And number three, we are comforted by knowing that if we are in Christ, whether we have passed on or remain alive, we will one day enter the kingdom of heaven for eternity. And this chapter closes with verse 18. It says, therefore, comfort one another with these words. And I hope that's what I've done here tonight. And I encourage you to read the entirety of chapter 4, maybe when you get home. An invitation is now given to everyone that has a need. If you desire to become a child of God or become a partner doing the Lord's work here in this church, or you just need prayer or something else that we might be able to help you with, won't you come forward as we stand and sing?